Thank you. Like I announced already, this is the audience participation part. So now you have to work. And I will not talk for another hour and a half. Now you have to work. The idea is to talk about a few dilemmas you may encounter while doing your work as a PhD student and a postdoc. It might be dealing with authorship. That's the first case. The second case will be with the role of the senior researcher. I do have a case concerning conflict of interest as well. And then I have some final remark about becoming a whistleblower and how to decide how you should proceed when you consider becoming a whistleblower. But let's start with the first one. The case is as follows. You are a third-year PhD student and you are conducting a randomized clinical trial which is supervised by a senior investigator called B, and you are called A. You're in the anonymous mode. The researcher is coming from the university hospital. You yourself, as PhD student, are not a medical doctor, and so you ask B to help you to recruit cases for your study. Now, the point is that B is busy, and he asks C for assistance, another medical doctor, who's happy to do so and make some really useful comments on your study protocol. Remember, you write your study protocol first, and then you embark on collecting your data. And you agree that C can be a co-author on the envisioned paper at the end of the trial. Now, a few months later, C is on maternity leave, and another person, another Dr. D, is asked to help out. The recruiting is quite a lot of work, and that person, Mr. B, he also claims a co-authorship of the future paper. The senior investigator, your supervisor, tells the PhD student A that D is a smart person that would be able to critically comment on your draft article, so it might be useful to have him aboard. And it happens also to be his son-in-law. It can happen, of course. B decides to promise D the authorship, again another co-author, and the PhD student, she reluctantly accepts. There's still no paper, there's still no data, the data collection is still going on, and the authorship list is growing. It's growing, and it's getting worse. When the paper is nearly ready to submit a few years down the line, B calls the PhD student. He has met Professor E, wonderful chap. He treated also some of the patients in the trial, and he, on the spot, offered the professor a co-authorship on the paper as well. And the professor accepted. This would, and that is what your supervisor is saying, definitely improve the chances in a high-ranked journal. Remember, this professor is a big shot, so it might help to enter a good journal. Additionally, your supervisor B, he really wants to work more with Professor E in future, and he hopes that E will recommend him for tenure. So there is some looming conflict of interest here. There is family involved, and there is an opportunity to get a tenured position involved. Now my first question. You were the PhD students. Please consider yourself to be that PhD student. How would you respond to this situation, to this last potential co-author, Professor E? Would you say, no way, not again a new co-author. The paper is already finished, so it would be wrong to add a professor as a co-author? Or would you say, Machiavelli, science is politics? Of course we list the professor as a co-author. It might be useful for my career as well. Why not? It costs you nothing. Or C, excellent idea. I could use the professor's expertise to improve the introduction and discussion of the paper, and that would be enough to justify his authorship. Your votes. A. Who says A? No one. One. Right, right. Who says B? Only one. C. It's not the rest. Many people are undecided. Well, why are you undecided? Why are you undecided?
I have a few questions regarding this option. I mean, it's different that we have that optimism that that person is going to actually help. It would be different if the person at least committed to helping the introduction and discussion, and also it would probably depend on the authorship criteria. So maybe we already know at this stage which journal we will submit it to, and different journals have different authorship criteria. So maybe helping with the recruitment, introduction, and discussion of the paper is enough to be an author, and the person committed to doing so. That would be the best case scenario from
Yeah.
this three options.
You're like C, and you say, well, it might be doable if this professor is willing to help. But you don't know. You don't know. How are you going to sort it out? You're promising the authorship now, and whether the guy delivers, you will know later on. But it's a good option. It's a good option. It might justify an authorship when the behavior is there, but you're not sure. How would you do that?
We could probably at least ask for like a verbal commitment on doing so.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah. You could write an email and say to this professor, now listen, I heard that you're interested to be an author on my paper. That's wonderful. Thank you very much for it. I just went to a course and I learned what the criteria for authorships are. And am I right in assuming that you will comment critically on drafts of my papers and try to be actively involved, and are you willing to take the responsibility for my paper? And then he will probably not react, and then you will ask again and again and again, and then you still have to decide whether he is aboard or not. So it can get nasty, but you can try to play the naive position. So when I'm just learning the trade, and I understand that these are the criteria for authorships, do I understand it correctly that you're going to comply with them? And saying no, he will never say no. And he might say, well, maybe it's not a good idea to be an author. Or he might say, shut up, I'm an author on your paper. It might happen. You said the first option, didn't you? Why was that?
I think that if the papers were finished, I don't need anyone else. Because I finished the article, so that's it. If I would add something, I should go the author before finishing the article.
Yeah.
So if an author that did not rewrite the paper
Yeah.
could be like wrong.
Yeah. You take the moral stance. Enough is enough. I've got a lot of co-author aboard already. I'm not going to digest another one because he will. It would. I don't need it, and it's hardly possible to deserve authorship at this late stage. Are you not afraid for the consequences of being so strict?
Well, I think we should not be afraid of consequences if we want to change the system. So, I'm a person, I'm a student, so I don't know. I'm not a researcher, so maybe I could.
No, but still, but I'm. Please be careful. I'm not saying that any of the answers is right or wrong. I'm just trying to tease out why you picked the answer, and you take for the high moral attitude, which is quite clear, but then the negative side effects might be substantial, which is not nice, but it might happen.
Yes, but I think that if we want the better systems, we have to fight for it. So sometimes we have to make choices that might be not so good for our career,
Yeah.
not sending a good messages and like fighting for a good research.
No, you're sure. You're doing quite well. You're doing quite well. That's true. But it takes courage. It takes courage, and there may be negative consequences. It might not be easy. And in fact, I'm teaching a lot of courses to PhD students on research integrity, and then they have to bring up cases they experienced. And it's almost always about authorship. It's almost always about, at the final stage of a paper, then suddenly there are 2 more authors on the paper. People you've never met. But they're supposed to be authors because they were involved in writing the research protocol when you were still in high school, more or less. So you have no clue where these people are coming from. And that's not nice at all. And some people feel so bad that they say, no, I'm not going to accept it, like you're suggesting. And other people, they've read Machiavelli probably. Most people take this opportunity. They say, well, it's costing me nothing. Adding another author, the price is low, and when I refuse to accept it, my difficulties will be enormous, which is a cynical viewpoint, of course, but that's what many people do. Sorry.
I agree with science is politics, and because science is politics, I still think that I don't need to add an author because it's politics. I have to send a message.
I love your view, so I'm not trying to explain to you, don't do it. I love your view, but I'm only trying to explain that the downside of it might be substantial. And your own supervisor, like this person, your supervisor will be angry because they say, why are you doing so difficult? You're going to leave the university in a few years. I'm there for the rest of my life. I have to collaborate with this guy. Please, let's be nice to him. That might happen. That might happen. Sorry.
I just have another listening to the discussion, and probably this is a question for Lex. Is it possible to use what they call white lie to deal with a situation? For example, if she would say in the future, oh, you know, I have submitted a paper, it's already under review, the time has left.
You're so clever.
It's not yet submitted, but you know, there's no possibility to review. You know, sometimes it's still lie, but I say white lie.
Yeah, a white line. Yeah. Yeah, well, most of us are not holier than the Pope, so white lies are allowed in life, of course, and saying the truth all the time makes you not a nice person, not at all. That's true. Yeah, it's a little bit in the arena of what we were suggesting in our discussion. You could play the naive charge and say, well, I've been to this course. Remember, I'm the new kid on the block. And I've learned that these are the criteria for authorship, and I checked it at the journal, and yes, these are the criteria. So please tell me, am I right in assuming that you will fulfill these criteria? Otherwise, of course, you cannot be an author, as I understood in my course. So, and that's not exactly a white line, but you're playing the naive chart then. But saying that you submitted already while your supervisor knows that's not true, it might be risky. Because the supervisor wants to please this professor and says, well, this professor calls me and said that the paper is already submitted. That's not true. You did not submit the paper. He knows it.
Yeah, but even if it can be that you can know or even don't know because supervisors are very busy and we don't realize what the situation is at that moment. But perhaps instead of making this direct confrontation and using white lies, if we're probably using some comments, okay, I think involved in my future research, you know, but it's postponing this.
Yeah, well, that's
offering to write a new project, including that person or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good option as well. Probably this is not the last chapter in your thesis. There might be more chapters. And you might say, well, it's so nice that you're interested in helping me out. And the bad news is that this paper is already finished. But the good news is that I'm now working on this paper. Would you please be interested in helping me with this paper? And then you frame it in a really, your rejection, you then frame it in a really positive way. And that might be a solution as well. But the difficulty is that it's difficult. The tension can be really enormous. it's an open nerve for many young scientists, especially in biomedicine. All these authors popping up once the work is done. And some people, like you, really take the moral attitude and even get angry. And it sometimes means that they are organizing their own difficulties in the future, which is not nice at all, of course, and it's not justified, but that's the way it works. And other people, they use white lies, or they try to please in another way and frame it in a way which is acceptable. But then again, this is an option, which is, of course, not the best way to solve it, but it's the way utilized by many of our colleagues, because they believe that the price they have to pay to object is just too high. And the cost of having another co-author are so low for them, because it doesn't mean anything for their citation profile, when you still believe in citation profiles. Interesting. These are the criteria for authorship. You've seen them before? You said I have to look at the journal. That's not needed. All journals are the same. They all have the same criteria in the biomedical domain. And these are the criteria. You have to make a substantial contribution. It's not easy to define that, but you need to make a substantial contribution to the conception or design, or to the acquisition, analysis, and interpretation of the data. That's one condition. The other condition is that you have to be involved in drafting and revising the paper, and not about the dots on the I only. It has to do with the intellectual content and the message of the story. Okay? Don't improve the English a little bit and then consider yourself a co-author, which is what people sometimes do. So intellectual content, clear but difficult to define as well, of course. And then you need final approval for the version to be published. That's forgotten quite often. I'm always a bit corrective to my postdocs and PhD students when they send in a paper of which I have not seen the last version they're sending in, because it's an application. I'm aboard. I have to approve that one. And sometimes I allow them to send them in without seeing it again, because they are only going to change 2 words, but they need to have the permission of all the co-authors that this is the version to send in, not only the first time, also after the first revision, after the second revision, to the next journal, to the next journal, to the next journal. Because you don't know that already, but when a paper is accepted immediately by the journal you send it to first, you aim too low. You could have been in a better journal maybe. So you need to be rejected to sort out where your paper belongs. It's not nice to be rejected, but you get used to it. You get used to it. And you know that. That's reality. And what is important, that authorship is not a free rider. There is a price to pay when something goes wrong. You are accountable for the paper and the work behind it. When it's proven to be fabricated work or plagiarism is involved, you are one of the culprits when you are one of the co-authors, even if you didn't know anything about it. So there are risks involved. One of the first cases of research misconduct was a cardiologist called John Darcy, an American cardiologist, came from India originally, and he wrote 100 papers a year. It was amazing. In 1 year he wrote 100 papers. And he had famous big shots cardiologists from all over the world on his papers. It was wonderful. All these people, they got a manuscript that looked wonderful, and he only had to look at was whether their name was spelled correctly. And they all agreed. But it was fabricated data. And then it turned out that this guy published 100 and plus fabricated data papers, and he was sanctioned for that, of course. And then the co-authors start shouting, well, we never saw the data, we didn't know that, we were not involved in the whole thing. Yes, they were involved. There were co-authors on this paper. So there are no free rides. When you accept a co-authorship, you accept a risk. When you have never seen the data, when the data have been collected in another country, in another culture, you have to trust the first author, and if not, it's stupid to accept an offer for a co-authorship. Now, nowadays, there are ways around it. Some journals use a system which is called qualified authorship. There you can declare what you did as a co-author. And then you can say, well, I don't know nothing about the data, I have no clue what happened in the lab, but I happen to be a good statistician and I help them with the data collection. I was involved in the conception of the study, I was involved in critical revision, and I accept responsibility. So then you are an author, but you're not responsible for the whole paper, you're only responsible for the data analysis part. Qualified authorship, that's called. Many journals use it nowadays, and it's a way forward, because you need to know what people have done and for what they accept their responsibility. So authorship has more dimensions. That's the message. But it's never free. It's stupid to think that free lunches exist. They don't exist. Someone has to pay always. Yeah, sure.
By saying final approval of the version, do you mean only the text? Do you mean also including others that could be others, the order of others? What is the version? What is behind it? Because you can invent some others if you want.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's another topic. When you are an author, you accept responsibility for the whole article, everything, unless it's qualified authorship. But you allude to the fact that some people play games with authorships. I've done a lot of this type of shows together with Sabine Kleinert from The Lancet, and she has some really funny story about it. She says, well, it happens quite often that I see a manuscript with my name on it as a co-author. No one asked me. And what they do is they put her name on it because she's a famous person, and then once the paper is accepted, they send an email to the journal and withdraw that author, so she will never notice that she was there on the manuscript. Her name is used to carry the manuscript towards acceptance, and after acceptance they withdraw the authorship. So many journals are now clever enough to say you cannot change the authorships anymore after acceptance. And you have to withdraw the paper when you want to change the authorship after acceptance. And there's much more going on as well. You know that probably. There is also the habit to invent peer reviewers. Sometimes you have to name peer reviewers. I'm not recommending this, guys. Let me be clear about it. You have to recommend peer reviewers because the editors are lazy. So they want some names that could peer review your papers. And what then people do is they take famous name. They start a Gmail account on that famous name, which is feeding in their account. And then they're able, when this reviewer is picked with the famous name, to write a review themselves. So it's called peer review. And so now the big journals like BMJ, Lancet, New England, they all have people working that check all these suggestions and check whether people exist and whether this is indeed their email address. A lot of work. There's a question there, yeah.
I have a question about this authorship system, and it's not about why it is not done, but if making the authorship anonymous would help resolving the scientific misconduct of papers, because and in making this science more about the hypothesis and computation and less about politics.
So having no authors, is that what you mean?
Yeah, to like a scientist work for a paper, but it will never, society will never know that the paper was published by him. It will have to judge the paper just for the
face value of the content, yeah. It is a nice idea, but The flaw I see coming is that who is then responsible for the paper when there are no names on the paper? Then no one seems to accept responsibility. Yeah, when you have the data just out there, when it turns out to be flawed, no one will know that you submitted the data there. So it's in a way, I agree with your point that science is not about egos. It's not about holification of persons. It's about truth finding together. And in that sense, it's a nice idea. And some people say that you need to withdraw the names from a paper when it is peer reviewed, which is a good idea on principle. But the point is, when you send it to reviewers of the field, they will recognize immediately from which lab it's coming. So it's rather undoable. The blinding of authorship in the review process is rather difficult to do. And people refer to their own work a lot, so you can see it in the reference list as well. It's not that easy. But keeping it blinded after publication, that's a new idea. I have to think about it, and I have heard it before. But the point is that it's not clear who is responsible for the work then anymore. That's the point. Yeah, sure. Franco.
About autoships, in my opinion, that often it happens that researcher included an author because it's a huge name.
Yeah.
So the big journals cannot say my paper because the author is included.
Yeah, sure.
Another problem.
Yeah, that's another point. And that's what that...
Include authorship not for the interest of the paper, but for the interest of the paper will be found.
Sure. And that was suggested in this task as well, that this professor might indeed be a big shot and help acceptation. And then the point is that help acceptable or not? It doesn't improve the paper. It only improves the likelihood that the paper is accepted. Yeah, that's a moral issue as well. I agree. But the Sabine Kleinert example I showed you is using a name of an important person who doesn't know it herself. And she showed me the examples. A whole list of Chinese names. It happens in China quite often. And then Sabine Kleinert in between. And then, when the paper is accepted, they are trying to withdraw that name. It's really funny in a way as well.
But I think there's also another drawback with having it blind, because maybe if it was published, if it's trying to be submitted by people that do comply with integrity, then maybe that would be a point in favor of the submission of the paper.
Yeah, it's a difficult issue. I'm not decided myself about it as well, to be honest. It is additional information to know where the stuff is being done. When it's a lab I know of, with solid work, with good supervisors, I tend to trust the work better than when it's coming from a group I never heard about.
Is that okay? Does that have more benefits than...
Yeah, well, it's happening with grant applications as well. Yeah, well, what are you judging? Are you judging the plan or are you judging the CV of the applicant? And it's probably a bit of both. And I'm not sure that's wrong. Maybe you should trust the person and say, well, maybe the plan is lousy, but it will improve along the way. And it typically does.
As you said before, for the auditing,
Yeah?
maybe if auditing can increase your career prospects, maybe it can also increase the value of your scientific work.
Oh yeah, auditing improves the quality of science. That's mainly the trustworthiness of what you're doing as well. Yeah, I fully agree. And again, auditing is work. So it's another argument to slow down. Slow science is really a good idea. You know, in Italy, of course, the slow food movement, the slow science movement is really important as well. Shall we move on to the next one? The role of senior resources. This is the story. Again, a PhD student. PhD student, the same one, the A again, discovered that she has to sign the National Code of Conduct during the PhD graduation ceremony. That happens in the Netherlands. You don't have a national code, I learned today, but it happens in the Netherlands. You have to sign the code, which is stupid. I'm sorry? They don't sign it. No, that might be clever. She starts reading it and then wonders about some of the things she did or did not during the PhD the research, things that seems natural, that no one discussed while along the way. For example, she had help from these doctors recruiting the patients, and they all were made co-author. We've heard about it. And also that no one looked in her syntax files and at her data set. No one checked it. There was no auditing. The supervisors were way too busy. No one looked at it. What if later others start questioning that work and a committee wants to scrutinize it? And journals have the right, typically they reserve the right, to ask for your data file, to redo your analysis and to check your stuff. Will they find mistakes? She's getting nervous and insecure. No one checked the analysis I did, and I did them for the first time. I don't know for sure that I did it correctly. I did my best. And also, whether I did it completely away, which was in the study protocol. The truth is, the study protocol was written by my supervisor. I hardly ever looked at it. I just did my own thing. So now I need to go back to the protocol to look whether I did what was promised in my name. What will happen if I don't work here anymore in this lab? I will move on, maybe to Melbourne or another nice place. Will they be able to find the file on my computer? Where will they be, the files? And will they be able to identify the final versions about all the messy stuff which is also on that computer as well? You can recognize that maybe. Will they be able to reconstruct what I did? Because also 5 years down the line, questions may pop up, and then someone at your lab need to produce what was done in this PhD process. Now, she could ask her supervisor to check the syntax a bit late, but still it can be done. It would take a lot of time, and it would also feel uncomfortable, because then, in fact, she's telling her supervisor that they did something wrong by not doing that already, before. It's their task, of course, to do these things and to make sure that it's being done. On the other hand, when nothing is being done, it would leave her insecure about mistakes in her work. And it can be quite existential for PhD students who discover this rather late, that the stuff that is normal is not being done in their project. Okay, if you were the PhD student, what would you do? Would you ask your supervisors to dig in your work, to really check it, the syntax, to redo the data analysis, to look at the output, to look at everything really closely and to check whether she did it correctly? Would you leave it like it is because you don't want to overwhelm and annoy your supervisors and suggest that they did something wrong? Just ignore it. Or would you leave it, also ignore it? You don't want, but now for yourself, you don't want to delay the process, you're quite late already, you don't want to spend another 3 months redoing stuff, it's all awful, you want to move on, you trust yourself, and know that your analyses are correct, and you move on. So you ignore it, again, like in B, but now for different purposes.
Sorry, as she already published the article?
Let's assume not. Let's assume not. I'm making it up as we go along, doesn't matter. Who says A? Yeah, maybe 10 people. Who says B? 2. Who says C? There's a C. Can you explain why C?
Because I think that while I'm working, I'm not doing the things that I'm doing, thinking about my knowledge, and I think I have done all right.
Yeah.
Because I should have checked it before.
Yeah. You trust yourself. You trust yourself and you say, well, this is all wonderful, but I did a good job. I know that. I was there all the time. So you trust yourself. So no need to check it again.
Yeah, because
That's what basically what you say.
I check it myself before.
You checked and you double checked and you're sure it's correct. Yeah. So trust in yourself. Eh? That's the main reason. Great. Someone here said B. Was that you? Yeah. Why was that?
Because if I really with think that I made something wrong with my data analysis at the very beginning, I would have talked to my supervisor earlier. So I think it's more correct to do these things when I think it's the real problem is to maybe late now to present the problem.
Yeah, you said this is a bit embarrassing, and I should have thought about it maybe myself, and no one thought about it. Now it's too late at this stage to do this and to make difficult claims on my supervisor. Yeah, that's your point. Yeah, that's your point. And the people who said A, who wants to defend the point A? You're taking the difficult option. Why do you do that?
First of all, I don't want to waste my entire work, whatever the work I have done with dedication.
Right.
Silly mistakes that I can do. I don't know. It may be how smart I may be, but sometimes supervisors' expertise are very important.
Yeah.
They can pinpoint the things that
Yeah.
I may not be able to.
So you say, now I know this, that this is normal, this is expected behavior. I want my supervisors to check the stuff. There is no alternative. And I'm not making myself popular with it, most likely, but I'm moving forward. So you have the courage to do that. Yeah. May I have a show of hands? Who of you have supervisors who are looking at your data? None? You have supervisors looking at you as well? And who has supervisors not looking at the data? Yeah. Well, why is that? No time, or are other people looking at the data? How does it work?
Other people, not the supervisor,
Yeah.
but younger.
Yeah. That's a good alternative. Well, I have not always the time to look at the data of my postdocs and PhD students as well, although I love to do it. And the solution is quite often that they seek a buddy, another postdoc, another PhD student, and they decide to swap the analysis, then to redo and they redo the complete analysis in another city, in another lab, in another country, and they do that for each other. And then when something funny is popping up, I look into it, but then I don't need to redo the whole analysis myself. So that is a good alternative. The point is that you need other people to look at your stuff. Never trust your own analysis. You might be right with your own analysis, but it's not good to trust it. It needs to be checked by another one. And especially when you know a check will be done, you realize that you need a good data analysis plan as well. Otherwise, no one can redo your data analysis. So it's a nice way to nudge yourself into having a good data analysis plan as well. So it's really important. But again, there are different options, and this is not right or wrong. This is just difficult. And it also alludes to the fact that supervisors are quite responsible. They should see this coming. It's not a good idea to wait for a PhD student. You want to ask a question?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to add a comment about this.
Yeah, sure.
There are people with no answer about this question because according to the Italian system, during the preparation of cases, we raise all these issues. So during the preparation of the cases, we have to answer, we have to address all these issues about the methodology, data analysis, and so forth. So
Yeah.
for me, I don't have answer about this issue.
It's solved by the the way the committee looks at your PhD thesis manuscript. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And do these people, the people on the committee judging your PhD thesis, do they ask for your data set and do they redo the data analysis as well?
No, they analyze the data, if there are questions, they raise all the issues about these things, and I have to answer to them. So, otherwise, I cannot put forward my thesis. This
Sure.
is the procedure.
Yeah. So you have to react to comments and to questions, of course,
Yeah.
but that does not mean, if I understand you correctly, that someone is grabbing your data and trying to redo your analysis. Committee members are not doing that, probably. And that seems to be the point, that on that level, the checks needs to be installed as well. And it's good that you have an active committee looking at your PhD thesis results, asking clever questions, and nudging you into good answers. That's wonderful, of course. Yeah, that's important as well. Okay. I alluded to this already. The roles of supervisors are, they should be responsible. Remember that supervision and mentoring was number 1 on the list, on the top 5 of research misbehaviors. It is so important to have a good role model. You're learning the trades from a few senior people. You need a role model. You don't need only standard operating procedures. You need a role model, a living example of how you should work as a scientist. And they should be responsible for the research, because PhD students and also postdocs, they don't see the problems always coming. They will hit them immediately, but the supervisor should know already what is coming and prepare them for that, and send them to good courses to prepare for all the difficulties along the road. And you should be accessible. After the first session, we had a small discussion here. There are supervisors who have 10s, 40, 50, 60 PhD students. Even when you never sleep, it's impossible to treat them all well. It's really impossible. So you should be accessible. You should be there for them. And talking about myself, it's still my most important responsibility to be there when your postdocs and your PhD students need them. And it's never easy, because they're all different. It's really amazing how different they are. You have to speed up some, you have to slow down some you have to praise with some exaggeration, other ones that can do that themselves, and you have to tone down a little bit. So they're all different. And that makes it's worthwhile doing. It's never routine, but you should be there for them. That's really important. Some of you will be supervisors later on. Be a good one. Treat your PhD students and your postdoc like you would have been treated yourself, and when you're lucky, like you were treated yourself. That would be nice. You should be fair about co-authorship. It's an open nerve for many postdocs and PhD students. And you should be open about your own doubts and your dilemmas. I don't know everything myself. I hardly know anything. So I have doubts and dilemmas myself all over the place. And it's good to talk about it, to be open about them, and to make people learn that it's normal to talk about dilemmas. It's normal to have questions about your research. It's normal to question the research of the neighbor in your room, and you say, well, I'm not sure you're doing the right thing. Maybe I can help you. Let's sit together and look at these things. And it's a good thing that someone is willing to help you out with your research. So be open about it, and you need to learn, also as a supervisor, but also as a PhD student, to accept criticism. That's typically not our nature to be enthusiastic about critical remarks, but they can be so helpful. If they are meant constructive, they can improve your work enormously. That is important. Okay, you still the spirit for another one? It's the last guy. And it's an awful one. This is the story. A PhD student is writing a study protocol. This is good. Writing a study protocol. That's a good start. For an intervention study. In the grant application, it was stated that measurement A would be used as the primary outcome of the study. Now, this PhD student, during his master program, became familiar with an instrument B, which is measuring the same in a different way, an alternative measurement instrument. And he believes that B, not A, B is the superior option. So the idea is, let's move on to B, because it's better. Yeah, that's the idea in the head of the PhD student. Now, there's a daily supervisor, the PhD student, which is good as well, daily supervision, it's a good idea, proposes to swap A for B. And then the supervisor says, no, we're not going to do that. And the supervisor is not even interested why this PhD student would swap that. Which is strange, because science is about argumentation. It matters why you want something. It's important to talk about it. And the supervisor says, we already have instrument A, everyone is using it. Our department has a lot of experience with that instrument. We all use it. And besides, it's faster and cheaper. It's already in-house. We don't want to delay your project already further. So it's a kind of mild threat. And you're not that fast anyway. You don't want further delay as a PhD student. So there is a bit of repression there. No way to even talk about swapping A for B. We're going to use A and you're going to use A. If you were the PhD student again, what would you do? Would you say, well, I have faith in A, everyone in the department uses it, so it must be good? You accept the authority of the habit in the department, and why not? It's a good department. Would you say, I refuse to continue with A, I take the moral high ground, and I do a literature review, and I will prove that B is better. I look for the evidence that B is better. I sort it out. And then I come back, and then I will convince these supervisors, because they are supposed to be rational people. C, forget about this daily supervisor. I go to the other supervisor, which happens to be the head of the department, and I will sort out the issue with that supervisor, convincing that person to swap A for B. Who says A? Two doubtful A's I see here. Who says B? A few more B's. And who says C? What do you say, C? Yeah. So you say, well, this daily supervisor had his chance. It's not acceptable answer. I go to my other supervisor. And if the other supervisor says yes, they can sort it out together. It's a bit Machiavelli again, but it might work. It might work. It might work. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad. I might do it myself in that way as well. So it's not a bad idea. No, that's great. But you're still convinced that we should swap A for B, yeah? And this is just a way to realize that aim. Great. The people who said B, there were a few there, I believe. You said B. Why was that?
B.
Yeah. You can both have your terms, no problem.
I would choose B because I don't trust myself, and trying to argument could enhance a discussion with my supervisor,
Yeah.
and so trying to understand why would he still pick A.
Yeah. That's a really understandable stance as well. You would say, well, remember, I'm the new kid on the block. I'm just learning the trade of being a scientist. This is an established department. When they do it always with this instrument, they should have good reasons for it. I just don't understand them, but I will learn that along the way. And you accept the authority. Is that your argument as well? Accepting the authority. Yeah. It's not unreasonable. And many PhD students do that because they are insecure, because they're new to the trade. They're just learning. Now some people said B. You were one of them. Was that B? Who was saying A? I'm now at A. Yeah. Well, why did you say A?
Not because it's a great option, but because BNC sound a bit scary. The way that the conversation went, it sounded like it was very set in stone.
Yeah.
Maybe if the conversation was a bit different, and I could like say the supervisor, well, what if I do a review, or that was the conversation, I would be able to do it.
Yeah.
Not out of the blue appear with a review.
No, you want. It's a pity that you didn't get encouragement to deliver your intuition in the form of a review of the evidence which is out there, which is more or less what science is all about. Finding arguments, pro and con, an idea. And probably this is an option. That I'm involved in an Amsterdam group as well, who is doing psychrometric for measurement instruments. And we have a whole website, it's called Cosmin, showing how you can compare measurement instruments, because this is normal, that you have multiple measurement instruments doing the same trick, namely measuring this outcome phenomenon. And you need arguments to pick one or over the other, which may depend on the circumstances. And we are doing a lot of systematic reviews. We call them clinometric reviews.
How do you spell it?
It's called Cosmin. C-O-S-M, Isaac, and then N. I can send a reference to Marco if needed. It's a whole toolbox, but now a good toolbox of stuff you need when you think about making your own measurement instrument, which is usually a bad idea, but when you cannot resist it, it says you how to do it and how to judge the quality, the psychrometric qualities of other measurement instruments. There was a question there. Yeah, please.
If we can modify the option B.
Amendments. There is the amendment coming. What is it?
Continue with the instrument A, and we, meanwhile, conduct a literature review, bring some precedent, some evidence to the supervisor to suggest that people have used the B and it works better.
It's wonderful. And you knew what was coming already, because this is coming. Once the PhD student left the office, the daily supervisor returned to the computer and Googles a little bit and was curious about the instrument B. And then she says, well, I've heard about it a couple of times. I never thought about using it. But now I get more interested in the instrument. So the supervisor is a kind of delayed response. The first response was not really beautiful, but the delayed response is, well, maybe this PhD student has a point. Let's look into it. And then, now when you were the supervisor, not the PhD student anymore, you're now the supervisor, what would you do? Would you keep the idea of using instrument B in mind for a next project? Because you are so busy anyway, you're not going to use it in this project, but maybe in the next project with a new, fresh PhD student. Or would you go back to your PhD student you have now, apologize, which might be a good idea because you have been not optimal in your behavior, and say that might be promising, and then we should have a look, and that is your suggestion, at the possibility to use both instruments, because then in the project you can make a comparison. You can give all the participants both instruments, or give them to the random half, or whatever, but sometimes there is a possibility to compare both instruments, and then to publish which one is superior. Or would you say, well, this is over my head, we have a difficulty, I need to talk to my colleague, the other supervisor, who is also the head of the department, and sort it out first with the other supervisor, and then go back to the PhD student. What do you prefer? Who says A? One? You tend to be a minority, sir. It's good. It takes courage to be a minority, but it's good. Who says B? It's a few more. That's what? It's a rational option in many ways. It has been suggested by you. And who says C? Now you can pick only one.
But I think that it depends on the kind of problem.
Yeah, sure. So you need to do both.
It depends on the kind of problem, how much it's strict, defined, and which.
Yeah, you want to know whether it's possible, and for that you need the head of the department. Yeah, that makes sense. The people who said A, who want to justify your answer? You did that. Can you justify it?
Definitely, I will keep that idea as what is good, but I need to understand it first.
Yeah.
And then I will go for the literature, whatever is there, and I will convince myself, and then I will keep that idea in my mind. I can't just do B because I don't want to, exaggerate my student, or maybe I don't want him to spoil himself to be more on the
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, a C option, I would not choose. It will totally depend on the funding.
Yeah.
At the end, whether we have the funding.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. All realistic stuff and money and time comes in there, of course. That's your point as well, of course. And A is understandable because, well, for a PhD student, that PhD student is filling the whole world. But for the supervisors and for the department and the research group, it's only one tiny stone in the whole building. So it doesn't matter that much whether you swap instruments in this PhD project or in the next one, because you're going to focus on the similar instrument for at least the next 10 projects you anticipate. So then it's not important anymore, and practical measures can decide whether to try instrument B in this project or in the next one. And so that seems to make sense to me. Who will like to justify the motivation for B? Who said B? Yeah, please.
Science is also innovation, so it's good to have new approaches for study. And in a perfect world, we should test both instruments, but for me, if I can prove that, so if I saw potential in an instrument, even if different than I thought first, we should use.
Yeah, it's a nice opportunity, isn't it?
Yes.
But I'm going to criticize it, but I think it's a nice opportunity as well. But there are two difficulties. One difficulty is that it feels like it is a free rider. It can go along anyway, but you're still paying a price. It's work, and the load for your participants is higher, and they may even get confused in getting two instruments focusing on the same thing. So you might pay a price for it, and the more conceptual thing is that what can happen is that the two instruments are giving answers which are similar, and then it doesn't matter which one you pick, or they're dissimilar, and then you have difficulty in deciding which one is best. So you need an external criterion as well when they're different to decide which one is the better instrument. And it's not the better instrument is not the instrument which gives the more spectacular and positive results. I can tell you that already.
To be honest, I would test the both and empower the conclusions with the comparison.
Yeah.
Depends, of course, the results, but I think it's positive for the conclusion.
Yeah, but it can also be negative and they point in different ways. So you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk. But I agree. I might do the same. I might do the same. Oh, sorry, who said C? No one? Oh, sorry. Yes, C.
Well, I think the point is that the head of the department must be involved if I want to change something. So probably I would do B, but like not C, this, the department.
Yeah.
That I like about the answer.
Right.
That I am transparent about what I'm doing with my.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. And you're consistent in your answers. Over the cases, you're consistent in your answer. You take that stance again. And it's also what Marco was saying, you need to collaborate with the other supervisor, with the head of the department, so you better check that early. Yeah, that's the point. And that is what happens. The supervisor talks to the head of the department, and the head of the department is furious, really furious, get angry. And angry because it's even an idea to use instrument B. He explains, the head of the department, that A is developed by him, the head of the department, and it's closely linked to our good reputation, meaning my good reputation, probably, as the head of the department. What he does not mention is that he gets a nice additional income from the instrument. There is copyright, and people are paying for it. And now the PhD student finds this out. The PhD student discovers that the head of the department is earning substantial additional money from the copyright of the instrument, and he is plugging the instrument in all international conferences. The whole department is forced to use the instrument, although there may be a better, superior option. And now the PhD student, talking about his girlfriend, they decide that it's now a good idea to go to the confidential counselor of the university. By the way, do you have a confidential counselor here for these instances? Marco? Do you have confidential counselors here when there is an allegation of research misconduct?
Well, not so confidential. I was just mentioning that maybe it's exactly also for the room. That a good example of something that some situation that parallels your case that it's not so uncommon in Italy is about professors who push students to use for the preparation of the exam their own book.
Yeah, well, that's right.
It's quite common.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a little bit.
And that's a conflict of interest as well, because they're making money by that book.
Yeah, it's not about.
I never recommend my own books. By the way, my books are.
But we had cases. I don't know if anyone here was minded just because he knows about these cases, also in this university. I can say that this university, as I told you yesterday, has a code of ethics.
Yeah.
Even if no one knows about it, it's a very good secret that is kept.
It's a well-kept secret. It's in, but you don't have a confidential counselor where you can go when you have a question whether you should make noise about this thing, where you should file a complaint or not. You don't have them.
It includes an explicit rule exactly about this issue because everyone knows, even if in all these years no one even raised any objection. Or
Okay.
any case.
So the system is not working. Sorry.
I'm from Padua, so I can speak from this university, but I don't even know what's a university confidential counselor. I never heard of this.
Now, what the idea is, and we have that now in the Netherlands, it's relatively new. It's maybe there for 15 years or something like it. That there are people, typically recently retired professors, where you can go and talk about your doubts, and they will keep it confidential. So when you say, this happened to me, should I file a complaint? Or am I right or am I wrong? What should I do? Can you please advise me? Can you please help me? And they keep it confidential. They counsel you. Sometimes, but only with your consent, they can do mediation as well. And they can arrange a discussion between you and your 3 supervisors, and then you can, with the mediation skills of that confidential counselor, you can try to sort out the issue, but only when you allow that person to do that.
So it's like there is a legal contract.
Yeah, these people, they can never tell anything. And that's sometimes difficult, because I'm running meetings for confidential counselors in the Netherlands as well. They sometimes hear things that make them unable to sleep during the nights. And they're not allowed to tell anyone. They're not allowed themselves to file the complaint when the potential complainant says, well, this is too risky. I'm glad I told it to someone, but this is enough for me. I'm not going to take the risk. I'm not going to file a complaint. You have to respect that, which is not easy for the confidential counselors. So it's a tough job. And now we organize them on a national basis. They can talk confidentially together and then talk about this type of difficulties they have. So let's assume that you have one. Yeah.
Maybe can I add a few information if it might be useful? In Italy, this is not a widespread model, but as far as I know, I think that a few universities have a similar figure. They call it garante. Usually, it's like an ombudsman taking care mainly for students' complaints.
Yeah. You can have an ombudsman as well.
Mainly for students, sometimes. When we wrote, I told you that some 7, 8 years ago, we were involved writing this code of ethics for this university. We made this proposal to the academic senate director to think about a specific counselor, but this proposal was rejected, and in place of this proposal, we obtained that now this university has, even this is not so much known, but we have a committee which is composed of one representative of the university, one representative of the professor, one representative of students, and one external person who is appointed.
Okay, so you have something.
Yeah, just to say that if anyone would like to have some reference, it's possible to find something.
Yeah.
Even if it's not so clear.
It's not well published. And in my university, we now have, I think, 12 confidential counselors in every research institution, in every faculty, and they are really active in making themselves known. And people go there when they have authorships, disputes, for instance, or when they fear that something is really going wrong, like maybe in this instance. Because this is the last thing. What will happen when this person, the PhD student again, goes to the confidential counselor? And remember the case. Would the confidential counselor say, well, the head of your department is having a clear conflict of interest, but as long as he is transparent about it, that's good enough? Or would the confidential counselor say, the head of the department has a conflict of interest, which is the same, rules must be set, and the impact on the people in the department must be as small as possible. These people should be free to use instrument B if that is good for this study. Or C, this going further, because this head of department was also financially involved, he earned a lot of money by the instrument, he should be reprimanded, maybe degraded even, and he should pay back the money or part of the money to the university, because this is wrong behavior. We need to sanction it. What do you think? Who says A? Is it good enough when the conflict of interest is clear? No one says A. I always hear that you need to declare your conflicts of interest, and that's about it. And you need to declare them, but sometimes the conflicts are so strong that you need to do something more. Who says B? Oh, yeah, a few Bs, yeah. Well, why do you say B?
Well, I would not pick option A because it does not make the professor responsible
No.
for what he's doing.
It's not good enough, A, for you.
And option B kind of responsibilizes this person. I mean, you have to be aware that what you're doing might be harmful for people who work with you.
Yeah. it might or it might not be good enough, but I like the idea. It's similar to writing textbooks and having instruments out there. It may be not wrong to earn some additional money by them, as long as the people in your direct environment are free to use the textbook they want and free to use the instrument they want. And that seems to be your argumentation.
Yeah, I mean, there should be no coercion on people working with you.
Right.
They do not completely share your...
Yeah, and it might not be good enough because it's clear that the head of the department, when you want to please the head of the department, you will use instrument A still. Yeah, but then it's more on a voluntary basis that you yield to that temptation. Yeah, that's true. Who would say C? No strong views on that. It might get nasty, these things, because in many universities, at least the universities I know, we nowadays have rules for side incomes. And depending on the rules for earning additional money by having textbooks, by doing consultation, by getting grants when you travel to conferences to give talks, and by instruments, sometimes the rules are that everything is income for the university. Often, at least part is for the department, and quite often, maybe half of 1/3 of the additional income is for the person at issue. But normally there are rules and regulations for that, and this might be a way to check and recheck these rules and to implement them a little bit more strictly for this person.
Is there the danger that if the department gets money or the university gets money as well, it makes it harder to, just like that, less coercion on the employees or the researchers?
Yeah, well, the general topic is, of course, that it's in Italy the same as in my country, I believe, that for financing of science, you are dependent on multiple parties. It might be funding agencies, it can be commercial companies, it can be governmental agencies, and there are risks involved. I'm not saying that you should never accept money from industry, like some people do. It's not a bad idea to accept money from industry because it's money and you can use it for your research, but you need to be really careful about your independency and the conditions under which you get money. And sometimes people start to censor themselves, because when you are in a department and you get money from GSK, for instance, big pharmaceutical company all the time, and hardly any other sources of funding, in your head you start thinking that you need to please GSK with everything you need, which is not a good idea. So you need funding from multiple sources. That's typically the idea. And then you can accept money from industry and governmental agencies as well, as long as you have good contracts and you have the ability to function independently. I mentioned this Dutch Code of Conduct. A big chunk of the Code of Conduct is about how to keep your funders at arm's length, how to maintain your independency in academical research, which is not easy, but it should be done, of course. Time is up. Can I have 5 more minutes for the last slides? Is that doable? You can still digest them? Okay. There we go. I skipped this. I want to talk about whistleblowing. This is a cartoon from Nature, it was, a few years ago. It's showing that whistleblowing is a dangerous activity. It often ends awful for the whistleblower. I would wish to be able to tell a better story, but it always is risky for a whistleblower. And here is another cartoon for a whistleblower. Your colleagues typically don't appreciate a whistleblower. They're always, not always, but often treated as traitors, whistleblowers. And here is another one. So whistleblowing is risky. You may have heard about the Diederik Stapel case, the guy from Tilburg University who was a wonderful supervisor for his PhD students, he collected their data. That hardly ever happens, that a professor collects the data for the PhD student. There was only one tiny problem, that he made up all the data. So he gave data sets to his PhD students. They wrote theses about it. 12 to 14 PhD students wrote theses about fabricated data. But he was a wonderful supervisor. He provided the data to them. And then there was 3 courageous PhD students. It was university number 4 where the guy was working already. He was now dean of the psychology faculty. And these 3 courageous and clever PhD students, they said, this is fishy. And they started investigating it. And they said, well, we are now sure that he is making up the data. And they had the courage to go to the rector of the university. They still didn't have a confidential counselor. They had nothing, no ombudsperson. They went to the rector of the university. And the rector, who was a friend of Diederik Stapel, and they were playing tennis every Sunday, did a good thing. He said, well, this sounds awful. And he called Diederik, you need to come now. And within 10 minutes, Diederik Stapel confessed, which made it easy. It made it easy because typically these cases last for years sometimes, and there is never a confession. So it's always fishy, and always the whistleblowers are in difficulty then. But now these 3 courageous PhD students, they were treated well. They had an extension, they got postdoc positions. The rector took their under his arms and made sure that they had no negative side effects from their whistleblowing activity. But that is more or less an exception. Whistleblowing is dangerous. And this last part of my presentation is about whistleblowing. This is an article I wrote together with a colleague from Belgium a few years ago. And it was interesting because this colleague, we met on a conference, was incorrectly, wrongly accused of research misconduct. And it took him 6 years of his career. It was awful. There were 5 investigations. All investigations said that nothing was wrong, but he really got damage in his career. And that got him interested in false accusations. So what we tried to do in this paper, to say the whistleblower needs to be protected, but also the person who is accused by the whistleblower needs to be protected, unless it's already clear that something wrong happens. But sometimes nothing wrong happens, and then the damage to the reputation is already done. So that's the reason we wrote the paper together. There is not much research. There is one study, it's 12 years old. It was done about the whistleblowers of the cases on the website, the proven cases, the website of the Office of Research Integrity in the US. Maybe 53 whistleblowers or something like that. And they were revisited, questionnaire, interviewed, and then 3/4 of them, they felt stigmatized by their whistleblowing activity. And 2/3 experienced at least one negative outcome. More than half of them reported mental health problems due to whistleblowing. More than 40% decided to drop the allegation along the lines. 28% reported even physical health problems, and 1/4 of them reported job loss or job of loss of research report. That may not be correct because it's a perception and it's an estimation, but still, this sounds awful. Whistleblower is a risky undertaking, and you need courage. I'm not saying you not to be a whistleblower. I'm saying better think before you do it, because there are risks involved. And maybe you should go step by step. You should always consider alternative explanations. You might think that this is fraudulent, but it may not be the case. So try to devise alternatives and check them out. Ask questions as long as you can. Don't make charges and accusations before it's absolutely necessary. Figure out what is the documentation that supports your concerns. These 3 courageous PhD students of Diederik Stapel They had a whole bag of files there. They documented everything. They checked and they rechecked everything. And then they were sure about their case. It took them months. Don't go overnight. Don't act too quickly. And also separate your personal feeling from your professional feelings. Because the people you are tempted to accuse are often people you don't like or even maybe even hate. And maybe they're not nice people at all. But that's irrelevant. Research integrity is about behavior as a scientist. It's not about being a nice person. There are awful persons in science, of course, like everywhere in life, and there are wonderfully nice persons in science. In fact, this Dietrich Stapel was a wonderful, nice person. I've talked to him several times. We've been in conferences together. It was a wonderful, nice, social person, a wonderful presenter, a good teacher. Nothing wrong with the guy. Only one thing. He made up the data for his PhD student. So, separate professional behavior from personal feelings. Assess your goals. Decide what you want as a whistleblower. Do you want this guy to be fired? Is that your goal? Do you want that paper to be rejected? Is that your goal? Do you want to prevent this from happening in the future? Is preventing your goal? That matters. That matters deciding about your strategy and deciding when to stop filing complaints and being difficult. And also get a second opinion from a person you trust. Unrelated, a professor in another university, typically you go to a more senior person, a person you trust. And listen to that person. Don't assume that the person you trusted in the first place is trying to covering up for the culprit. No, listen to this person. They may be right and you may be wrong. So take it seriously. And if you still don't trust it, go to another trusted person. Check it out. If you decide to go on and file a formal complaint, seek strengths in numbers. Like the 3 PhD students, they helped each other. They were scared, all 3 of them, but they were together, they were courageous enough to file the complaint. That made a difference. Do it in the right way at the right time. Because organizations don't like these complaints, and it's wonderful for them when they can disqualify your complaint because you didn't follow the correct procedure. Always follow the correct procedure and know what the procedure is, know what the steps are and what your rights are. And finally, be patient, be patient, be patient. It might take for years, but you need to be patient. And if you do it in that way, step by step, I give no guarantees, but then the detrimental side effects of whistleblowing will probably be the smallest. And I admire people who have the courage to be a whistleblower. Not all of us have the courage to be a whistleblower, but when you are, please make the risk for yourself as small as possible. Good. That was what I had to say today. Thank you very much for your attention.